So, as of filming this video right now, we are a little over a month away from PlayStation 5 actually coming out. Now, we don't have a complete launch lineup confirmed, although there are a number of games that we know will be ready for day one. And so, let's look back on PlayStation 4's launch lineup, how many games were available, the quality of those games, and see if it will really stack up to what we're expecting on PlayStation 5. Now, if you remember the PS4's launch lineup, and even the first year of that console being out in the market, then you may recall the general consensus around that being that it was fairly underwhelming, and this happens often with console launches because there's just not a whole lot to play in that first year, or it doesn't feel like the library is not that large, because it isn't. Although if you do compare it to PlayStation 5 and what we know for the system's day one titles, and even that first year, PS4 starts to look even worse than it actually was, although inherently PS5 has afforded certain opportunities that PS4 just was not going to get in 2013, and we'll dive into all that. But let's start with Sony published titles, that's first and second party. These are games that the platform holder is backing on day one, ready to go, and it's supposed to be your incentive for purchasing their hardware on day one. So let's actually start off with a big one here, Killzone Shadowfall. This was initially revealed during the PS4's announcement back in February 2013. This was the nearly 2-hour long conference Sony held announcing PS4 as a platform, not showing the console, but announcing the key features, principles behind designing the platform, a little bit of the UI. We saw first, second, and third party take the stage to announce games, new tech, and some of their hopes and dreams for the platform, and Killzone Shadowfall was one of our first party games that did arrive on day one for PS4. And Killzone is an established franchise in PlayStation history, goes back as early as PS2, and actually there's not many PlayStation franchises that stretch across PS1, 2, 3, 4, and now 5, but Killzone does reach most platforms, and so this is a long-running IP that you expected on PS4, and we haven't seen one since the original 2013 release, so it is somewhat obvious, but I think even Sony is well aware of this. This franchise did not have the staying power with consumers that they would have really liked. Otherwise, we would have had another entry in this franchise by now. And that's not even so much a matter of, Guerrilla Games wants to go and do something else like Horizon Zero Dawn. If this IP was important enough, Sony would have fielded it out to another developer and given it a different home, just like how Microsoft found a new home for Halo after Bungie left, right? If this was a large, important IP, they would have continued doing that. So it's not really to say that Killzone Shadowfall was a bad game, but it just wasn't a game good enough to continue onward. And here's the thing, I love the Killzone franchise. I played a lot of Shadowfall back then, a lot of the multiplayer, which is rare for me. I don't often play multiplayer games nowadays. Well, nowadays, it was 7 years ago. But back then I was also going for the Platinum Trophy. And if you recall, that's one game that I infamously walked away from in that video where I discussed Platinum Trophies that I gave up on. Shadowfall was one of them, just took too long. But, that was enjoyable. Story, I forgot. I think that's very forgettable, and that's part of the problem with a franchise like Killzone. As much as I like it, and a lot of the community, the diehard community for it will vouch for how great it is, and I'm right there with you, but I can see how this franchise ended with Shadowfall. Now, we do have a rumor that Guerrilla Games' second team that has a lot of FPS talent is working on another Killzone. I think it's probably a new IP. I'd love to see another Killzone, though. It's just that right now, there's no massive indication that it is a Killzone. Shadowfall was serviceable for what it was, and that was a launch day game that was definitely worth playing for sure. Now, let's talk about Knack. This is a game where in recent years it's put on this meme-like reverence pedestal for being so fantastic, but we all know we're not really being serious when we play into that stuff. It's a game that came out day one, reviewed mixed. I don't even think many people thought it was great or fantastic, and depending on who you talk to, it was a bad game. But this is Mark Cerny's first game that he got to direct. If you don't know Mark Cerny, PS4 architect, PS5 architect, and the Vita architect. He's been with Sony for a very long time, and ironically, fun fact, he's never been an official employee. He's always been a consultant, or he's an independent contractor to Sony, and this was a title that he finally got to direct. He's worked on many close first-party PlayStation exclusives, and this was his first game that he got to do. He described it at the time of a mix between Crash Bandicoot, Katamari Damacy, and a little bit of God of War, and that's actually quite accurate. At surface value, it's a colorful, fun-looking platformer, but if you set it to hard or above, it's actually quite difficult, and that's one of the many things that I enjoyed about the game, and you have to place it in time, right? Because I'll be the first to tell you, this game did not have the charisma that other prominent platformers had in history, but Knack was so refreshing on PlayStation 4. We were leaving a generation, PS3 and 360, where it was riddled with first-person shooters everywhere. Every major publisher put out an FPS where if you lined it up to other FPS in that timeline, they all were gritty and dark looking, and those are fun, but after a while it gets kind of boring. And so having a colorful, higher budget platformer on day one, I think, was the best thing that knack had going for it, and it's unfortunate that that was the only thing that it really had going for it. Next up is Resogun, and this was, by and large, the best PlayStation 4 exclusive you could play on day one, which at the time upset many people because, understandably, you don't buy a brand new console just to play a smaller scale $10, $15 arcade shooter, but it was the best game that you could play that was only available on PlayStation 4. Now, luckily, it was part of PlayStation Plus, so if you were a subscriber, you got the game for free. Whether you liked it or not, you had the chance to at least try it without no major investment, because this was also when you needed PS Plus to play online. So you more than likely subscribed at this point if you hadn't already from PlayStation 3, where it wasn't a requirement. So you had the chance to try, and it is a fantastic game. It's got that side-scrolling Defender, shoot-'em-up style. It's gorgeous, it's got incredible music, and I think most people will probably remember this one because it's their first experience with the DualShock 4's speaker, where when you start a brand new arcade match, it will audibly shout from the controller, "Save the last humans."
Save the last humans.
And I remember everybody at the time was just like, whoa, that totally freaked me out back then. But this was a game I really enjoyed, and I'm slightly biased here because one of my favorite games to this day is Super Stardust HD, one of Housemarque's games, and that's one of the few titles I'm like actually good at. I have a high score on PS3 and PS4. I'm not quite as good at Resogun, and I don't like Resogun as much as Super Stardust, but yeah, I put a lot of time in Resogun. Now, in terms of brand new exclusives, that's everything, although we did see day one ports for Sound Shapes and Flower, and these are fantastic games. You can have a lot of fun with them, just that they weren't really compelling you to buy PS4 hardware when they're smaller games, they're more niche, they're from PS3. Now, if you bought them on PS3, it was cross-buy, so you got them on PS4 for free. Just, these weren't really games that were helping the PS4 lineup. And so when you look at the exclusives, whether you think it was underwhelming, good, or fair, it is worth remembering that Drive Club was supposed to be a day one launch title, with a PlayStation Plus version as well. Just, this was delayed last minute, wasn't able to make launch, but Sony was planning for this game to be available alongside all these other titles, which I think would have certainly helped it look much better than it appears so right now. Also, we do technically still have one more exclusive to go over, and that's the Playroom. This was free, pre-installed on every single PS4, just that you needed the PS4's camera to actually play this, and it was really more of a 30-minute to an hour-long technical demonstration of what the camera could do facing the DualShock 4's light bar. And so, while it was really cool tech, it wasn't super meaningful. The best thing we got out of this was the reoccurring updates for this, and that's why we're also seeing Astro's Playroom on PlayStation 5. We saw Astrobot Rescue Mission. That was a great platformer. At the time, this was actually abused for people broadcasting themselves on Twitch, just themselves full screen from a PS4, and that's when Twitch started to double down on opening up separate channels of the site where people could broadcast themselves and not necessarily gameplay. So that was actually a really funny moment back in 2013, but that was an interesting time, no doubt, but let's move on to the third-party games, and we do have to work through these a little faster, otherwise the video would take way too long. So for third-party, we've got our typical yearly franchised releases like Madden, NBA, FIFA, Just Dance 2014. Not much to say for these games. They come out every single year, fairly predictable. You either buy these or you don't, and it stands to reason that if you're buying PS4 back in 2013, you probably bought the PS4 version of these games. Going over the rest, though, we have Angry Birds Star Wars. I'm not sure how many people were clamoring to play that back then. Maybe if you had a kid, it made sense to justify your new PS4 purchase. You bought that game with it. Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. This is a franchise that really surprises me in that I can't believe it made it and is still going on, because I distinctly remember in 2007 playing the first game and thinking, oh, I don't really like this, but I kept going and I was like, oh, I don't think this franchise is really going to make it. And yet, here we are in 2020. We got Assassin's Creed Valhalla releasing on PS5 and Series S and X. There's 10 plus entries in this franchise, I think, between mainline entries and spin-offs. And so, it's got a fan base. People really enjoy these games, and I was certainly wrong on that one. Next up, Call of Duty Ghosts and Battlefield 4. These are both well-known, established first-person shooters, and so depending on which one you preferred, it was a safe bet for you to buy these, that you were probably going to like them and enjoy them. Unfortunately for Ghosts, that was more of a low point in that franchise. That seems to be the general consensus there, but at least initially, it seemed as though you had a safe bet with buying either of those games. Then you have Injustice Gods Among Us Ultimate Edition. This is a game that came out a few months after the PS3 and 360 release, and so whether you bought it back then or not, that was a game that you had an idea going into it of what it was like. Lego Marvel Superheroes. If you like the Lego games, then you already know what you're getting into. Need for Speed Rivals. This also wasn't the best Need for Speed, although it was a Need for Speed nonetheless that you could play day one. It seems like when it came to racing, you didn't have many choices to play, so that was a title that you either were forced to play or not if you were into that genre. You've also got Skylanders Swap Force. This was more of an Angry Birds situation, so if you had kids, it probably made sense there. For smaller scale stuff outside of first party, you had Contrast. That was the other PS Plus game alongside Resogun, which is unfortunate for Contrast because that really put this game in the shadows of Resogun. However, Contrast was available, and fun fact, this was Compulsion Games' first title. They went on to then do We Happy Few, and now they've been acquired by Microsoft. You had Super Motherload, Trine 2. Probably one of the more notable highlights of the PS4 lineup was free-to-play, so you had DC Universe Online, Warframe, and Blacklight Retribution available day one, and the only good thing about that PS Plus requirement is that it wasn't required for these free-to-play games, so they truly were free-to-play, which makes PS4... It made PS4 very accessible, so if you only bought a PlayStation 4, let's say that's all your budget allowed was just getting a PlayStation 4, nothing else, then you actually had a decent amount to jump into and try, or maybe you were still a Plus subscriber from PS3, so you got the Instant Game Collection games alongside these free-to-play games. But essentially, that's the entire PS4 launch lineup, at least in North America, mind you. We can't do regional differences, that would take way too long. North America, at least that's it. And this is where we can now have a post-mortem conversation about it and comparing it to PS5. And this is where PS5 either starts to look really good or PS4 starts to look really underwhelming. Even something as simple as Astro's Playroom is far and above what we got with just the Playroom. Having a safe bet in the Demon's Souls remake or the shorter but new experience in Spider-Man Miles Morales alongside Spider-Man Remastered if you buy the Ultimate Edition is probably a much better situation than Killzone Shadowfall and Knack. And here's the thing, you're having your cake and eating it too on PS5 in Destruction All-Stars and Sackboy Big Adventure, which those two titles probably more closely mirror what we saw on PS4 in that one's a new IP, taking a risk. It may seem polarizing to spend $70 on it to give it a shot, but who knows, maybe it might turn out okay, maybe mediocre, who knows. Sackboy, it's established, but it just doesn't have the staying power, I think, nowadays that it once previously did, but it's still a game that you can go out and try. It's a cute little platformer, you can give that a shot. Third party, we're looking at Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War technically isn't day one, it's one day after. It's slated to come out November 13th, which is weird, but close enough. You've got console launch exclusives like Godfall, The Pathless, those are new IPs you can try out. Devil May Cry 5 Special Edition, Observer System Redux, these are remasters on PS5. We've got Fortnite as one of our free-to-play games on day one, but this is where we can get into PS5's inherent advantage over PS4, and it's not just the fact that it's backwards compatible, so you can continue playing PS4 games as if nothing happens, but PlayStation 5 will truly be a no-compromise platform going into next gen in both ways, in that you don't have to buy a PlayStation 5, or if you buy a PS5, you're not losing out from what you were getting on PlayStation 4. So yes, you can play 99% of the PlayStation 4 library. You're getting higher frame rates, higher resolutions, depending on if those games have unlocked frame rates or dynamic resolutions. You're getting decreased load times. Those are all beneficial, but you're also able to continue party chat with your friends as if nothing changed. You're able to continue playing games online with them as if nothing changed. And so this is part of what Jim Ryan was talking about back when he said it will be a smooth transition from PS4 to PS5. It really is that. Back in 2013, when you bought PlayStation 4, I mean, you were really going all in. You were not going to be able to party chat with PlayStation 3 players or voice chat or anything like that. Now, you could message them, but you weren't playing games online, you weren't doing voice chat, you really were going into an entirely new... It really felt like a brand new generation. This time around, it's not quite like that. It's a generation leap, but there really is going to be this smooth period where whether it's PS4 or PS5, you can buy when you're ready, and it doesn't penalize either group of people. Of course, this doesn't directly affect something like launch games, although it does indirectly affect the purchasing commitment for these platforms on day one, where with PS5, it's working for it, and for PS4, it's working against it. Anyway, that's it for this video though. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please subscribe for the best PlayStation news, reviews, and updates that are here on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter at Mystic Ryan, and that is it. I will see you all in my next video. You take it easy.